Well, I am before you all today because we are in crisis. This country has been in crisis for a long time, and I think that a number of people, a number of our leaders have failed to realize just how much of a crisis we're in. And folks thought the crisis began on January 6, 2021, but it didn't. It began long before that. It began when Republicans stood up an organization called the American Legislative Exchange Council. It began when stand your ground laws were on the books and when voter ID laws began to be proposed, right? It began when the Supreme Court gutted Section 5 and parts of Section 4 of the Voting Rights Act of 1965 in the 2013 Shelby versus Holder case. And so today we're talking about yet another crisis. We have not even hardly wrestled with the decisions from yesterday. We know that the Supreme Court ruled and struck down New York's concealed carry law. We know that they have authorized North Carolina Republicans to intervene in a redistricting plan put forth, right? And to defend the state's voter ID law. We know that today, of course, they have voted to overturn a woman's right to choose, our constitutional protections to choose whether or not to carry a child to term. We also know that now there is no longer any civil justice available for someone accused by law enforcement. If they were not properly Mirandized, they're just SOL. And so I'm saying all this to say, y'all, like, there are so many people reaching out with questions about what to do, what can we do? And the reality of it is, at this moment, me and you can't do a lot. At this moment, what we can realize is that there were a number of times where the alarm was sounded and we did not act as a collective, right? We've known that it's been time for us to organize around an agenda that was in our best interest, and we haven't done that. And so here is yet another alarm that has gone off, and we have the opportunity to rise to the occasion. Right now, the thing that we can do is apply pressure to our legislators. The reality of it is, in the Senate and the House, there's a very narrow Senate majority. And in the House, we can call it a majority, but there are a lot of people who don't think like you and me. A lot. And so what we have to decide is if we're okay with that, right? There's a lot of people who have talked about whether or not Joe Biden will pack the Supreme Court or whether or not he'll expand the court. And what we know is in December last year, Biden stood up a commission on whether to reform the Supreme Court, whether or not the court should be expanded, and that commission was split. What we know is that the Constitution allows for Congress to demonstrate or to dictate rather how many Supreme Court justices we can have. So what we know is there's been a bill introduced to expand the court from 9 justices to 13. That bill languishes in the House. We're not even talking about in the Senate yet. It languishes in the House. And so what we have to ask is whether or not these folks have our collective best interests at heart. And if they don't, we have to make them. They don't have to be our friends. There's a CBC member that once said, no permanent friends, no permanent enemies, just permanent interests. So I would suggest you exercise your permanent interest and you get on the phone and you call 202-224-3121 and you let your House members know and you let your senators know what your desired interest is, what your desired outcome is. And that is to ensure that we have a Supreme Court that reflects the needs and the values of this country. And I'm not talking about the crazies. I'm not talking about the folks that were scaling the wall on June 6th, okay? I think it's time for us to have that conversation, that very real conversation. So anyway, I'm here to answer any questions. I've been asked about what Joe Biden is going to do, what executive order he can't issue an executive order to expand the Supreme Court, what these cases mean, you know, the number of states that will be impacted, the number of states that won't be impacted, the women who will be able to travel, the women who won't be able to travel, to make sure that they're taking care of themselves and meeting their basic needs and doing what's right for their own bodies. People are asking for me to pin the number. I will do that. Again, it's 202-224-3121. I almost messed up. 224-3121. I'm doing that right now. And I would encourage you all, if you don't know, your members, I would ask you to look up on congress.gov. And I can't pin this. You guys are talking so fast. Wait, come back. Congress.gov. There we go. And reach and see who represents you. You can do it by zip code. What's my member of Congress by zip code if you don't know? There are a lot of folks who are talking about they're just going to focus on local elections, to hell with federal elections. That's not a good strategy either. Why do you want people making decisions for you on the federal level that don't have your best interest at heart? So let's make sure we're clear about that. Do not give up. It's not the time to give up. It's a time to be frustrated, and it's a time to use that frustration, turn that into action. So let's see. Can I tell people about voting? Sure, I can. But right now, we don't have an election immediately before us unless some of you all are still in primaries. The election is in November. Right now, we should be talking about what we can do to make these people who we did elect, and even if you didn't vote for them, your taxpayer dollars paid them, so you should make them work for you, right? They're not off the hook. They're not absolved from working on our behalf and in our best interest. They have some work to do, and so we're calling them to tell them what that work is. Somebody asked a question and it went away. Let's see. What should we do if my legislators are aligned with our interests regarding abortion and access to contraceptives? Call them and tell them thank you. Call somebody else's member and tell them they're on the wrong side of the issue. But yeah, so somebody asked about voting. Yes, I think it's really important that we're not only voting, but that we're educated voters. That's not our only responsibility. I think the place where people of color and disenfranchised folks typically fall short, in part just because it's hard to manage working, a job that may or may not be paying you livable wage, or you're the breadwinner in your family and you have a lot of folks to take care of. Never mind the fact that you may have elderly parents, or a sick child. It's hard to manage all of that, right? You have your own work to do, and you have to hold people accountable who forgot why they got there to begin with. I am so excited that Congresswoman Waters said today, forget this court, we will defy this court. She's always going to find a way around what's happening and let people know that we do not have to roll over and just surrender. She was the people's champ during the Trump years, right? It's like, thank God for somebody like her who's not just like, oh, this is bad, or worse. I saw an elected official today raising money off of this. It's like, you can raise money, but also, can you tell us that you're about to go and fight this? Can you tell us that you're about to go put a bill on the floor that overturns this decision? This is another thing that keeps coming up today. I just want to go back to this. So in case you all missed it, democracy's on fire. And I'm here today discussing some of those challenges, okay? So for one, people don't understand that Joe Biden can't issue an executive order to overturn what the court just overturned with this Roe and Casey case, right? What can happen is Congress can do that. Congress can say, no, actually, women do have a constitutional right to choose, and we are protecting and standing up for reproductive justice in Bill XYZ. I'm sure there is a bill that already does this that has not been considered in the House and in the Senate. It's time for that. So our elected leaders and the Democratic leaders in both chambers, right, Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi, can say, we're going to consider this bill today. They could have been done that also because we knew this decision was coming. We were told that this decision was going the way it was when this decision was leaked. It was leaked. We've had time to prepare. And yet somehow we're still on our heels. So I think that the most important thing is to understand when the Supreme Court rules on something like voting rights in 2013, the House of Representatives has passed multiple reauthorization bills to restore the Voting Rights Act to pre-Shelby days. Again, that 2013 case that gutted the Voting Rights Act is called Shelby versus Holder. The House has passed that bill multiple times. The Senate has not passed the bill. That is the problem. That is the problem. So we have this looming. We understand Congress has to address 2013. Congress has to address today, which is abortion rights. Congress has to address Miranda from yesterday. Congress has to address redistricting and the challenges around voter suppression. Congress has a lot to do. And most of those challenges are coming from that very slim majority in the Senate. There's no executive order that Joe Biden can write to undo this. Nothing. It has to be a piece of legislation that is passed in both chambers and then signed into law by Joe Biden. That's Joe Biden's role, signing the bill, right? So I just want us to be very clear about what's before us. If you are, somebody just texted about or commented about Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema. They're part of the problem, but there are a lot of Democratic legislators who they're giving cover to. A lot of folks who need to be asked straight out where they stand, if their values are aligned with ours. I think that folks should have to sign a pledge to get our support. I really do. I think that's where we are. Do you support reproductive justice? Do you believe in climate change? Do you support voting rights? Do you support getting us and restoring us to the Voting Rights Act that we had before 2013? Do you support the John R. Lewis Voting Rights Act, right? Do you support affirmative action? You guys know that's up next. Like, we have to be very clear about what is happening and how we now need to move. I keep talking about, and I have for years, there was a Black political convention in Gary, Indiana in 1972, the National Black Political Convention. At that convention, I was not alive, and I'm not saying it was perfect, but that was the last time Black people came together to talk about our collective political agenda. Since then, my good friend Alicia Garza runs an incredible organization called the Black Futures Lab. They talk to 30,000 Black people in this country through the Black Census Project about what our most important needs are. We should be coming together, y'all, to talk about what our needs are, develop our agenda, and like they did in Gary in 1972, we should be making elected officials sign a pledge to say that they are aligned with these things in order to get our support. See, somehow we have allowed desperation to dictate our progress. And as a result of allowing that desperation to dictate our progress, we don't have any progress to show for. We actually have gone backwards. My friend Anita posted something earlier that says, this is the first generation where our children will have less rights than we do. You got to sit with that. That's not okay. And we cannot roll over and just watch this happen. So I'm asking y'all to stand with me. I have to go right now. But stand with me. Do your own research. Be clear. Don't just be throwing stuff out. Joe Biden need to sign an executive order. Joe Biden need to do a lot of things, but an executive order is not going to fix this trash. We need some Supreme Court justices like Ketanji Brown Jackson with courage, like Sonia Sotomayor, like Elena Kagan. And of course, you guys know KBJ is replacing Stephen Breyer. But we need some more with good moral standing. No more clearances allowed, right? We know what these people stood for when they were confirmed. We were never confused. We need people of goodwill to do the right thing in those seats. And we have to expand the court. There's literally no way out of this, y'all. We're going to be up a creek if we don't expand this court. So we need legislation to expand the court. We need legislation that overturns this trash decision today around reproductive justice. We need real legislation that protects our voting rights. Stop telling us to get out and vote, and you're not protecting the voting rights we have. You meet us halfway. You make sure that when we get out to vote, we can. You make sure that when I go and put my life on the line, that you meet me right there. And that requires some efforting from our elected officials first. We just got to do this. So this is where I'm at. I don't know if I answered all the questions that came through, but I was getting a number of questions from friends, and I wanted to just take a moment to answer those. I really hope you all breathe today. It's a lot. It's heavy. You know, there are friends of ours that we have who could have gotten an abortion to save their own life. People who we know who have been raped or molested, right? And this was the only way out for them. So this is heavy. It's really heavy. We all have people in our lives, like yesterday with the Miranda decision, who weren't properly Mirandized, who have been abused by law enforcement. And we are slowly being told that we have no recourse, right? We're in the middle of watching the January 6 hearings. And a number of those lead co-conspirators haven't been charged, haven't been pursued. And there are friends at mine, at least, who have been pursued for nonsense, for trumped up charges, no pun intended. And speaking of Trump, we know the worst offender among us has yet to be charged with anything. And he broke a whole bunch of laws, right? So we have a lot to fight for. But today I'm also asking you to fight to protect yourself, to care for yourself so you can withstand the other attacks that are coming. If your friend or your sister, your brother is tired, help them to lift up their hands and gird up for this fight, y'all. We're not going anywhere. We're here. We come from a resilient people. I got my Harriet necklace on, okay? A resilient people. And we won't let them down or the future generations down. So let's go do this. Let's fight. We have a lot on our plates. Remember to breathe. And I'm here if I can answer any questions, even in the comments. I'm sending y'all love today, but we got to fight. This is some righteous anger. I'm mad and I love y'all at the same damn time. Bye.